Welcome. I'm Leanne Meier, and this is Once a Nurse, the original. I have had my show Once a Nurse, Always a Nurse since 2017, and my whole goal was to bring nurse voices out of the shadows and into the world. That has been my goal, and that's what I'm hearing back from nurses, that they are understanding when they think about me, that's what they think about. In the United States today, there are 4.5 million nurses who have focused their energies and patient needs on positive health outcomes for decades prior to and during the worst pandemic of our time. I have come to believe that it is nurses and nurse philosophy across our country and around the world that, along with like-minded integrative healthcare partners, will transform healthcare on every level to one focused on positive health outcomes. So this show is really all about bringing people together and talking and sharing with you what they do to transform healthcare. My guest today is Ilene Gottlieb, and I am really, really happy to have her come here. We have several things in common. One of them is we've both been nurses about 50 years, but also heart is so very important to both of us. And that has been true for me since birth, as far as I can remember. And so I'm so happy, Ilene, to have you come and join us today. Please say hello and welcome.
Thank you so much, Leanne. It is my joy to be here. Thank you for welcoming me. I've really enjoyed our conversation so far and getting to know each other, and I'm excited to be able to share this time with you and to support our nursing colleagues as we share, shall we say?
Exactly. I love to have my guests share their own story. Basically, I love stories. And so I love to hear nurse stories about how you just very quickly, how you became a nurse and then how you came to this point of being known by other people telling you that you are the heart healer. To me, that means for other people to say that to you, you have to start with some kind of fantastic heart.
Oh, it's a story, all right. But I will give you the abridged version. We don't have all day for sure. Right. I come from a family of nurses. I am one of those people that started out as a young child. My mom was a nurse, and I was the young kid with the Halloween costume that was a nurse. You know, the little white hat and the fake stethoscope and they called it a nurse's bag, and it had fake candy in it, like, little sugar candies for medicine and a thermometer and all sorts of various and sundry things in it. And I had on the little white uniform and my white sneakers. And I just thought I was the best thing since white bread, right? And I just always knew that I wanted to be a nurse. And I have an older sister who's also a nurse. It's just the two of us. And believe it or not, our mother really did try to talk us out of it. My mom became a nurse in response to a deathbed wish of her mother's when my mom was around 17 years old, which is when her mom passed. And I don't know what her life would have looked like had she not gone into nursing. It was at a time when she served in some way, I'm not really remembering what it was, in the Army, not overseas or anything, but there was some connection with the Army with her education. And she was trained in a hospital-based program in Philadelphia. Einstein Medical, I think, was what it is called now. It used to be called Jewish Hospital. And my sister and I both graduated from hospital-based programs. I actually started out you did too, yes. I started out in a 4-year BSN program at American U in Washington, D.C. This was prior to the bicentennial, so we didn't have all of the amazing transportation available to everyone when they come to visit DC now. But it was an extraordinary city to spend some time in. And I really loved the city. I loved American U, but I didn't love administrative nursing. And so after 2 years, I transferred to a hospital-based program. For most people listening, most hospital-based programs, if not all of them, are no longer in existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so everything that I learned, which is why I wanted to transfer, was oriented to caregiving. Right? Our lab sciences, instead of being straight sciences where you'd be in with classmates that were microbiology majors, it was more applied science in the diploma program, which spoke to my heart so much more than the actual science itself. The education was, for me, beyond wonderful. It got you into caring for patients very quickly. It taught you how to be a responsible member of a team, but that you were a member of a team. And that to me is something that I feel, although I haven't been in clinical nursing for a long time, but from what I hear, is truly missing in our profession and in the healthcare industry, at least not in the way that it used to be. Everyone was a respected member of the team, including housekeeping. And
Yes,
where I really, yes, right. And where I really was so touched by this was when I worked at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. Back in the day when C. Everett Koop was chief of surgery, and he used to be our Surgeon General. And this is how amazing to me nursing was back in the day. Our training as an orientee, a new orientee for the hospital, and I was a new grad on top of it, we actually spent time in every unit, including the OR. Not an extended period of time, but we were exposed to the environment so that we had a point of reference, especially when the kids were going somewhere, so that you knew how to help them prepare. But I mean, I stood there on a stool, right, so that I could see. And Dr. Koop was doing an intestinal surgery on a preemie. He had huge hands. That whole baby fit in one hand. You can imagine how precise that surgery needed to be. And I was able to be a witness to that, right? And that's the part of nursing that I will always hold near and dear to my heart, is the importance and value of recognizing your role as a member of a healthcare team, right?
Yes.
So that's my journey, how I started. I was a peds nurse at Children's, worked as a head nurse at another teaching hospital, moved out of that area up to Rhode Island and got really sick. So while I was recuperating, I volunteered for hospice at a time when there were no inpatient units. It was all strictly home care. Someone was your primary caregiver in the home. And I worked as a volunteer for a while, and then did some part-time work with outpatient women and infants clinics at Women's and Infants Hospital up in Providence. And then I moved from Rhode Island down here to Florida, where I make my home now and have since '85. And there was a hiring freeze on. I know, gasp. Can you imagine that there was ever a time when you couldn't get a job as a nurse, right? At least not within a hospital setting. And I was moving in from the outside. I didn't want the head nurse or the supervisory position, although I was more than qualified. I didn't want to come in that way. I wanted to be a part of a team. It's what I knew, right? And so I was offered a position working in a private office, which was my brother-in-law's office. He was an OBGYN physician with a specialty in infertility. And so I worked there, which was a unique experience for me. And I loved every minute of it because it was filled with patient education opportunities. And that I loved very much, especially prenatal and postpartum education. And from there, I started my middle career, which was as a nurse legal assistant So I worked for a mid-sized law firm that specialized in healthcare law, medical malpractice defense work for pretty much any type of healthcare practitioner. And I worked in that environment for 12 years. I loved it. It was, as I learned the law by rote, I was able to help the attorneys learn the medicine by rote for each case that they defended. And it was a fascinating experience. I met the most extraordinary physicians and practitioners and nurses from around the world that, to me, the bigger they were, the more generous they were. It was really quite an amazing experience. I was very grateful. And then in 94, I had a spiritual awakening, and I was guided to shift my focus in how I served. And it was at that time that energetic healing came into my world. And I started studying what was then called Healing Touch. The program is still in existence, but there are now 2 programs. I'm affiliated with Beyond Borders, healingbeyondborders.org. And I have been involved with this organization and had a private practice since 1994. It's hard to believe it's almost 30 years, but it has been my heart. It has been so expanding and empowering and fulfilling, and my passion for serving has beautifully been able to be expressed in this way. And the beauty of it is, as a nurse, I really appreciate the fact that we have so many different facets that of ways of being a nurse, so many different expressions of it, you know? And I am a perfect example of that. 3 very uniquely different careers, all with being a nurse at the center of it. And I am beyond grateful. So my company is Vibrational Healing from the Heart Incorporated, and I serve clients around the world. And I'm really...
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, is how could people connect with you if they wanted to? So it's, say again, your website.
My website is Ilene, you see it on the screen, IleneTheHeartHealer.com. And there is a contact page on there if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, or you're interested in a session. Clients can also, or potential clients can also, schedule a complimentary heart healer session, which is a 30-minute session with me that is my gift. It gives me an opportunity to listen to what it is that the beautiful person that chooses to do this is struggling with. And in listening, I open up my conscious channel, my intuitive wisdom, and offer whatever empowering information I might to support that person. And if they would like to work with me privately after that, then there also, that opportunity is there.
As you speak, and it reminds me again when we were talking before, when we got to know each other a little bit, we have had almost a parallel path. So many different ways. You and I have kind of come into the profession. I started also in the hospital nursing, which was perfect for me because I would do the training in, the classroom, and then almost every time I would come back and I would be, my patient would have that same, problem or whatever we had been talking about and learning about. And then all the way along the line, I wanted to be an OB. That was where I ended up being. Just so many different things that I can hear that we have in common. You are on this show today because we are preparing the road forward for our Power Up Nursing conference that we're having in Orlando, June 22nd through the 24th. And so we wanted to have our speakers, and we will have some of our sponsors on, to really get a feeling of what is this conference about. And so I would love it if you could say, why do you want to speak to the nurses, and what do you want them to hear from you?
Thank you, Leanne. I appreciate the opportunity to share those thoughts. I will say, first of all, that the opportunity to speak at this conference came from being on LinkedIn, and Tanya Abreu, one of your curators for this event, having shared a post. And when I looked at the website, it intrigued me. When I looked at the description of what this particular nursing conference is about, it piqued my interest. And I've spoken at a number of conferences over the last few years since COVID. They've all been virtual. This will be my first live conference, and I'm looking forward to that with a little bit of trepidation because I don't get out much, but I am looking forward to being next to people, being with people, and feeling everyone's energy in the same space rather than remotely. But what really struck me was the balance between the holistic and the allopathic subject matter and conversations that can be had to empower not only how nurses are in relationship to themselves, right?
Yes.
But also how they are in relationship to their profession and with their colleagues and in the environment that they're working in. And when I looked at the sponsors, I was just so pleased to see that this particular conference, unlike the other ones that I've been invited to or that I've participated in, are so also a nice balance between the allopathic as well as the holistic orientation for being a person and a professional nurse.
Yes.
Does that make sense how I language that, hopefully?
It does make sense. And it's, a couple of things that come to mind for me is when you were talking about kind of the path that you took. I think it's so helpful for nurses who are just trying to see what is my path, because for so many nurses, now they're going into the hospital nursing environment with a BSN. And it's been, from what I can understand from the nurses I talk to all over the place, they're saying that they don't get very much clinical. There's a lot of didactic, there's a lot of theory, but not as much clinical. So they kind of come into the healing environment, the hospital environment or other healing environments, having to find their own way of who am I in this environment, and also to see themselves as a leader. You and I, in that hospital nursing, I also worked as an aide. And I worked in the OR, and I had a number of different jobs. So in addition to what I was learning as a nurse, I was also learning it from the aspect of what is it like to be a nursing assistant and having nurses, work with me. So that whole concept of team and, realizing that every single member that is on your unit, on your department, in your hospital is a teammate of yours. And when you have that perception going forward, you tend to look at and interact with them differently. You see them as a colleague and as a support, as maybe opposed to somebody who is competing with you or, not necessarily 100% engaged in your success. I think there's probably a lot of things we could talk about that, and I don't want to get into it because what I really want to talk about is this heart, this conscious heart connection that you do. How do people, well, you said that they find you through your website, through probably a number of different ways that they find you. When, say, I'm coming to you and I'm saying I'm going to have this 30-minute talk with you, what could I expect? What would that be like? Will that be scary? Is that, oh my gosh, I'm sharing my soul to this person?
It's funny. A lot of people over the years have shared with me things that they've never shared with anybody else. And
I believe that.
And it will never get shared with anyone beyond me unless they choose to share it. I don't think that it's scary, but I can't I can't predict or anticipate how any one person is going to experience that complimentary heart healer session with me. Most of the time, and there's a little questionnaire that they are given when they schedule the appointment. And so it basically lets me know their contact information. It lets me know how they found me and what is it that they want to focus on. What is the problem, issue, or challenge that they want to focus on? But sometimes it may be a couple of weeks before they actually have their session with me, and they may change their mind. So we revisit that in the beginning of the session. And I just reiterate what it is that the session's going to look like so that they know that I'm going to listen to them, I'm going to offer feedback, and at the end of my time, I'm going to offer them an opportunity to work with me privately. And it's that simple. These are not recorded sessions. These are just a taste, shall we say, of what it is to work with me. But I also make sure that there is value provided to that person, so that there's a tool, something that's given to them in that 30-minute period of time that they can then take with them and start using right away. And I think that the other, I'm sorry, go ahead, Leanne.
I was just going to say that my experience with nurses, including myself, is that we are so used to being the givers that being the person receiving is almost painful. I've gone through a number of health issues, mental health, heart health, some of the confusion as we go through these years that have been leading up to the pandemic. The pandemic is certainly not the situation that created a crisis in healthcare. It simply was made plain to everybody, especially to nurses. I think most of us felt like sooner or later, somebody was going to hear us. Somebody was going to come and say, yes, we want to do those things that you need to be the very best nurse you want to be. And I think that the pandemic, for a lot of the nurses that I talked to, is when they recognized that isn't going to happen. I'm going to have to, move forward with that. And from my own personal experience, opening myself and looking at, I had so many negatives about myself coming up, growing up. And then as a nurse, even when I felt like I was doing a phenomenal job, I was really heart to heart connecting with patients. But somehow I would diminish that. In some way, I would try to diminish it. And so I feel like we need, as nurses, especially after this pandemic, nurses need to hear how profound we are, what it is that we do, the courage. It's kind of like a fireman going into the fire. We have the courage to walk into that room with a patient who is hurting on so many different levels, and a family that's maybe not dealing very well with it. And to do that, we have to open our heart to them and be willing to accept them where they are. And we don't allow that to happen for ourselves. So I'm thinking that's what you do. And I'm hoping that you can share how does that happen?
I think that's true for almost everybody in a body, Leanne. Nurses are, as a generalization, they are caregivers, not all of them, but most of them come into this profession because it's an expression of love that they're choosing. They are really caring, giving people. And I think that most people that are caring, giving people, believe it or not, have had trauma as children, and that it's not uncommon for me. In fact, it is more common that the people that I work with have childhood trauma, have self-worth, self-critical ways of being, and everything to me in this realm is all about who we're being in our relationship with ourselves first. And that's what's reflected in our relationships with other people. We get to see how loving we're being with ourselves by what's showing up around ourselves in our relationships with other people and our life experiences. And so as the heart healer, it is my job, shall we say. It's also my soul's purpose to remind everyone that really our purpose for being here in this human journey is to remember, not learn. We already know how to do it, but to remember how to be in a loving relationship with ourselves first. So every experience, no matter how joyful or how traumatic it might be, at its core, that's what it's designed to give us an opportunity to remember. I often tell clients to ask themselves the question, what's my most loving choice? And do that. And
one thing that I felt like I learned along the way of confronting those things that were not helpful for me in my life or in my career was to come to a position of, what if I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be? How would I act? How would I move forward if this is the precise place I've come to this earth to be, to learn, to grow, and to share? And once I changed that perspective, it became a whole different thing from not being enough to being, I must have everything I need. I must have come with those things. So how do I develop those things? And I'm thinking again that maybe what you are able to help people do is recognize.
It is a part of it for sure, Leanne, because I often tell people, we tend to go into judgment. It's very human to go into judgment of things, but we certainly don't judge what turns out really well, but we judge any choice, right? We judge any choice that we make that doesn't turn out the way that we would have liked it to. And so I invite clients to get rid of that would have, should have, could have, and to perhaps consider shifting that belief into everything in my life is really unfolding in the most perfect and divine way. And whether we understand the why of it or not, which we never will, but if we trust and know that everything is unfolding, then whatever choices we've made in the past, those were the best choices that we could make when we look at things linearly, because our time is linear in this dimension, right? And that moment in time, it was the best choice we could make based on everything that we knew and everything that we could intuit in that moment. Moving forward in the timeline into the present, when we look back at it, what is that expression? Hindsight is 20/20, right? Great to judge it, knowing what you know now, but in that point on the timeline, you had no clue what you know now. You come into the experience from the vantage point of who you've evolved into. And so deleting the would have, should have, could have is truly the best thing to do,
Tanya, are you joining us? Tanya? I am not sure okay. I think we had a little jump in there with Tanya joining us. I want to get to this concept of Ho'oponopono. It's a fun word to say, and I am so curious to know exactly how that fits into what we're talking about. How does that get to that part of ourself that's accepting?
Well, one of the things that I'm really pleased to be able to talk about at the Power Up Nursing Conference next month, or actually not next month, in 2 months, is the combination of conscious heart connection and Ho'oponopono as a tool for self-care for our colleagues. And what that looks like is, we've talked about conscious heart connection. We've talked about what my belief is about how important it is in our relationship with ourselves. And Ho'oponopono, for those of our listeners that are not familiar with it, is an ancient Hawaiian problem-solving process The ancient Hawaiians actually came into their life believing that they were there to atone for everything that happened before them, including in their ancestral tree. So the four phrases that most people recognize Ho'oponopono for is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And so in its ancient version, and the ancient Hawaiian culture is 2,500 some odd years old. So it is a very ancient practice that continues to this day. The ancient version was a facilitated process by either the head of household or the local spiritual leader referred to as the kahuna. And so anytime there was a problem, because the Hawaiian people treasured peace. Yes. So anything that disrupted the peace, either in the household or in the community, it needed to be nipped in the bud as quickly as possible. So as a facilitated process, everyone involved needed to be present. Everyone had to express love for each other. Everyone had to express, going through the four phrases, I love you, I'm sorry. Everyone had to say, I'm sorry, I apologize for whatever I did that contributed to this disruption in our peace, even though I may not know the all of what's involved with it. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Each person had to ask for forgiveness from each person for what they did to contribute to whatever the problem was that disrupted the peace. And in closing, everyone needed to express gratitude for each other. So I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And you can imagine that everyone having to do this with everyone, and it couldn't complete until everyone was able to do that it could have gotten a bit confrontational, right? And so in the 1970s,
with that, unless you had grown up with that from 2 years old, or your consciousness to adulthood, that is how things get taken care of. It's so brilliant, and yet
it really is.
Started in a current environment where people seem to be so suspicious, I guess, of each other. So,
untrusting, for sure. Absolutely. But it only reflects that they're untrusting of themselves.
Yeah.
And remember, everything starts with our relationship with ourselves. Yeah. And so as we move forward, there was a beautiful kahuna named Morna Nalamaku Simeona. She was a kahuna lapa'au, which is a kahuna who is adept at healing modalities. And she actually, her mom was a kahuna. I don't remember how many generations, but she at 3 years old said to her mother she was ready to start her training. So you can imagine, you can only imagine, if you've not met her, which she transitioned to spirit in 92. I can't even imagine how much a blessing it would have been to have met her and been in her presence. And so she was always awake to her connection to her divinity. Mm-hmm. And in the 1970s, she received in a meditation direction to update the ancient version of Ho'oponopono to what we now know it as, which is called SITH, is the acronym, or self I-dentity, identity through Ho'oponopono. The I represents divine intelligence or divine creator. And so what used to be facilitated is now completely self-contained. It is a conversation with your creator. And oh, my blessings. Are you okay?
It's dry in here, and I sometimes start to cough.
Oh, all right. So what was shifted from a facilitated process to a self-contained one can be as simple as saying, whenever you experience a problem, issue, or challenge, whether, and we honor the holistic model, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, all you have to do is say, whatever this is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, or just I love you repeatedly, or just thank you repeatedly. The I'm sorry and please forgive me are actually implied by the updated version whenever we say I love you or thank you. And what we're also doing when we initiate the Ho'oponopono process, excuse me, we're basically saying, I'm 100% responsible for everything, no matter what it is, but I trust and know that I don't know it all, and I don't need to in order to initiate the cleaning of whatever this is. And the cleaning or the transmutation is done by divine creator, divine intelligence, God, by whatever name it is known to each person. Does that make sense so far?
Perfect sense to me. In fact, I've been having a dialogue with somebody fairly recently over a period of time about karma and the concept. Her concept was that karma means that everything that's happening in your life, you are responsible for and at fault. That somehow you have done something wrong, that you are in the situation now.
See, that doesn't speak to me.
But I haven't been able to get across how I look at it as all that we have control over is this minute. And what this minute shows us is what decisions we've made in the past to get here. Am I comfortable with being where I am? Great, keep going with what I'm doing. Or if I would like to change something, then I have this minute to change it into the future. And it's so empowering to me. And one thing that you said was that concept that we are so connected to ancestors, to previous lifetimes. All of that plays into these moments we have now. So of course, we're not going to completely understand, why am I here in this moment? And you were saying earlier, why me kind of feeling. I came somewhere along the line, came up with, why not me? I took all of the wonderful things that happened to me in my lifetime and I said, yeah, right, bring it on. I deserve this. But when the negative things, or what I perceived to be negative, came, I saw it as, why me? What did I do wrong? And the reality is, I've been given an opportunity by having that obstacle or having that situation in my life. I've been given an opportunity to build, grow, develop, share something that I could never have known had it not been for that exact process. So we're actually coming to the end here. Is there anything else you want to make sure that you get across here? And is there anything you want to say to nurses to welcome them to the conference, encourage them to come, bring a friend, anything like that?
You asked me before, what did I want to impart? And this is, to me, why I think this particular conference is going to be such a gift to the nurses that participate. And it is that who we're being in our relationship with ourselves first is the key to everything. It is the heart of it all. And just like without a functioning heart, we cannot fully be present in our life. So without a fully functioning heart center, a loving relationship with ourselves, it becomes a challenge to hold the kind of space that incorporates a loving relationship with ourselves and therefore with others. And to me, that's the key for healing for our nurses and our nursing profession. This is not a new experience. As you mentioned, almost in the beginning of our time together, Leanne, nursing has always had a challenge with being seen as valued. And so we as the nurses must see our value first in order for it to be more fully recognized in our society that we're currently living in. And so being a part of this conference, I believe, is going to be giving everyone that wants that kind of an experience the opportunity to grow on a personal level, to have their own aha moments, and to network, to meet, to create friendships potentially with like-minded people, and take whatever the information is that they learn and bring it forward with them into their communities, the environments that they're serving in, which can only enhance it in wonderful ways. So I'm looking forward to being there. This work is important to me to share. Ho'oponopono and conscious heart connection helped me to heal my relationship with my mother at 90 some years of age before she transitioned to spirit. And it helped me to heal PTSD from childhood trauma. And so I believe in this work. It is my soul's purpose to share it. And I am so looking forward to meeting all of the divine people that decide to participate in this Power Up Nursing
And
Conference.
I am so looking forward to being in your presence and seeing what
Thank
you
you.
are going to be able to share with other people too. This is
Thank
really
you.
just so encouraging. This quote is a quote I love, and I want to share it here because it kind of fits in with the conversation we're having. And
Okay.
I heard many years ago, 25 or 30 years ago, somebody said to me, opportunity is cleverly disguised as impossible situations. And I believe that nurses have never been more uniquely placed for a healthcare transformation, with advanced practice nurses gradually achieving full practice authority in more states every year. And because we're so deeply touched by other human beings, if we can learn that concept of ho'oponopono, where we learn a new way of interacting with each other and with ourselves, that will take nursing further than we ever dreamed we could go. And nobody can take us there. We have to do it, all 4.5 million of us.
Agreed.
Thank you so much, Eileen. I'm so grateful to have you here today and to be able to meet you in June.
Thank you, Leanne.